incense burning. All space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddha smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. Abusita, do we have that on the list for the? Yes, thanks. So today I want to talk a little bit about what Buddhist practice means, so that we're clear on what we're doing. Some people just say that it means to be a good person, but I don't think that really conveys the meaning, the true meaning of what Buddhist practice is. If you cut negativities, that's good. If you nice to people who are nice to you, that's good. If you're even nice to people who are not nice to you, that's also good. But we have to understand it a little deeper if we're trying to get to the goal. So there are three aspects. There's the basis on which we stand. It's the basis, and then there's a path to travel, and there's a goal. So a lot of the teaching today, to just make it easy on you, it says there's no path. Just just enjoy the journey. There's no goal. And we don't want to talk too much about basis, because that might put too many requirements on people and they may not want to do this. And so it just kind of is out there in this nebulous field, and nobody really knows what they're doing, so that we're just studying stuff and we're talking about stuff. But it's a little more intricate than that. There's a saying in the Tibetans, in Tibet, that when your stomach is filled up and you're warmed by the sunshine, you become a good Dharma practitioner. But when you have a little incident and you become worse than ordinary beings, it speaks of our inability to endure anything. And often you'll find people who are not spiritual are way more tolerant than people who are. They just think like life's easy and you just live life, and what shows up is what shows up. But the more we start moving into some kind of notion of what is right and what is proper, it seems the tighter we get. And Buddhism is designed to take us from one place to another. And it does start with a recognition of a lack of discipline and how that causes our suffering. So discipline is not all about rules and regulations in the ways that we think about it, but discipline is about us looking and seeing clearly how not having particular disciplines affect and hurt us, and how when we don't have it, how it affects and it hurts others. So it's not something that we take up in the ways that we normally think about disciplines. We look at it or examine it through a lens of it being a protection, it being an instructor, it literally becoming a savior for us, so that the good we would do, we can do it, and what we don't want to do, we don't do it. And that eliminates the need for regret and for remorse and for sorrow. So when we start thinking of disciplines in that different way, rather than an opposing force or almost like an enemy or something forcing something upon us, if we begin to look at it in a little different way, let me see if I can see the date. Nope. If we start to look at it in a little different way, discipline will become our friend. Some of us have a lot of difficulty with discipline because of things we encountered in our childhood, our inability to speak up because we wanted to appease someone that we were with, and we didn't want them to go away, even though we don't like what you said, even though we don't like what you did. But rather than speak about it, we just let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, and then it's their fault, right? Because we didn't have the willingness or the courage to speak. We call it speaking our truth. But you know, I had a friend that always spoke the truth as he saw it. It wasn't to hurt my feelings. Well, first I'll say he didn't speak generally unless I asked, what do you think? That's the first thing. He wasn't always coming and pointing out something to me. So that could be a lesson. We shouldn't be pointing out things to people if they didn't ask. But when they do, when they consider you a friend and they tell you the truth, it's the best friend that you can have, because you always know where to find them. And they will help you to stay on the path, you know, because you can trust them enough to tell you the truth. And I really miss that kind of friend, you know, I really do. Because I am headstrong. I mean, I know me. Do you know you? I know me. Every place, the Dharma is my mirror. It shows me all the time. But it not only shows me, the me that I have fabricated, these habitual tendencies that I call me, these ways that I think that I call, that's Panyawadi's mind, you know. Even if it was trying not to show me, there's no way I could miss it. Because it has taught me to look at things clearly. Not the way I want them to be, not the way I try to pretend they are in front of other people, you know, but how they really are. You can't help it. You can't help it if you're studying and you're putting into practice the things that you study. If a person is continually deluded, I know that they are not studying and they are definitely not practicing, because there's no way. It's inherent in the process. It's a process, and it's inherent in the process. People don't have to say much of anything. You know exactly where they are. It's not a supernatural power either. It's just a clear observation. And so without realizing it, we're constantly bombarded on every side. It's like being in a house of mirrors. Everywhere you look, there you see yourself, up, down, round, in the back, everywhere. You have to turn it off deliberately to not see yourself. And some reasons that we turn it off is because we can't bear to see it. Some reasons that we turn it off is because we feel such a sense of shame. Some reasons are because we have so much regret. And I was going to say something about regret, regretting things that we've done. No, they're done. So, we cry over things that we regret. Better to cry over the things that you're doing right now than over things that you've done. What's done is done. Can't fix that. It's one reason why we lean more towards regret over past things rather than what we're doing. We lean towards that because we know it's done already, But when I'm required to make an action right in this moment, when I'm not willing to, I'm not up to it. I think I'm not up to it. My pride won't let me. My anger is just so out of the gate that I can't stop myself. All of these things where it takes a lot of effort, we'd rather have regret. Regret becomes a little bit easier to handle than trying to discipline ourselves in the moment to not do what we don't want to do and to actually do what we want to do. So the first part of that is knowing what we really want to do and being honest about that. The second part is recognizing that when we do that, the suffering that's going to arise from that is actually in motion right now. And being aware of that all the time begins to allow for the change, for the shift. Now, some of that has to do with how we think about things. And that's why the Dharma is always giving us something to ponder and to think on. Because whatever we ponder and think about, that becomes the inclination of our mind. So being good cuts negativities. And when you don't have negativities, you don't have as much suffering. When we think of then accepting defeat and giving the victory to others, well, we think like that's a negative thought right there. But what if we thought about accepting defeat and letting the other person win by the argument or whatever we have some rivalry around, letting them just doesn't mean anything. Let them have it. Just in India, they have a way of they shake their head like no, but it means yes. So if you don't hear, you're seeing no, but they're actually saying yes. Everything is like no. That's what they do. When I come back from India, I'm just like a bobbling head because it takes me like 6 months to get over, doing my head. But I like the attitude because there's no need to have argument about it. Or if that's what you think, no need for me to say anything. That's what you think? Okay. It's okay. And we find that we have less input then in things happening around us. And by having less input, we're getting in the habit of not activating the sense gates and constantly going outward for our information. Now, I'll tell you something happens when one works at this. So there's two ways that you can do this. One, you can just be a hermit. You could be by yourself, but you don't know if your mojo's working or not. It takes being with others to know whether it's really working. So it's how far we have to go down the rabbit hole to be satisfied with a conversation. Some people call me and say, "Can I just be in your ear for 1 minute? Just want to say one quick thing." And an hour later, I'm thinking, I got to get off this phone, because it just hops from this to this to this to this, back to this to this. And he says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. That's a tick we can put in our mind if we're one who likes a lot of conversating. There's something about being in the presence of one another and saying meaningful things instead of filling the space with a lot of chit chat. There's something really sweet about it. I could sit for hours with Panya Deepa, and we didn't have to say anything, Or sometimes we just sit and we're both reading and we're reading two different things. And I say, listen to this. And I read a line. And that was the share. We didn't have to talk about, well, what you think about that? We didn't have to do any of that. It was like, oh, this is such a gem. Listen to this. And we just shared. And then that whole atmosphere became rich and pregnant with something. Mm-hmm. And so we even have to learn how to be Dharma friends, the sweetness of it, and the mind-to-mind transfer that can begin to occur just by presence. And that's why they always talk about not forsaking, the assembling together. It's important to come together. But it doesn't mean that every time we come together, we have to have so much to say. That's worldly kinds of friendships. But we find a pleasantness and a satisfaction in the presence. A little talking here and a little talking there, but not, the Buddha called it animal talk, jib jabber, animal talk. He has all these phrases. There's another one for when you, I can't think of it, but it's when you're saying one thing, but you mean another thing, but you're so clever in how you say it. And he says, don't be like that. So be clear what you're saying and let your yes be yes and your no be no. He said, otherwise it's artificial. But here's the thing about the mind. We're training the mind to become a Bodhi mind. So we say things that we don't really embrace and really hold, can't really walk out, but we just say them. But after a while, it becomes true for us because we are making the mind as we speak. As we speak, some people, that's just me, that's just the way I wrote, that's how I talk. But when he talks about the refining of speech, and you look back on it, is that really a noble kind of speech? And if you don't have it, you don't have it, you know? But when you keep rolling around in your mind the pithy sayings, you develop that kind of noble speech. It's not developed easily. And if we try to force it, then it's even worse. You know how people go around and they're talking, they're trying to sound all enlightened, you know. But then sometimes when you're just trying to talk ordinary, I mean, whatever's in your mind, that's what comes out. So maybe like you're always talking Dharma because that's what's always in your mind. You see everything through the lens of the Dharma. Then it's not contrived. You are making a new mind. And when one is making or creating this new mind, then one doesn't feel like they're Paul parroting or that they're just following rules and regulations. It's something that's coming up inside of them, and they speak it with such a ownership that it has an effect on the hearer, because it has had an effect on the one who's speaking. And all of the patriarchs talk about stages of the path, knowing what stage you're on, and then imputing corresponding practices for that stage of the path. I got a wonderful text from Sue this morning, and I loved it so much. But I knew like Sue was doing an OMG, because it was really, I said, and she didn't ask me about it. She just sent it to me. And I texted her back, said, but don't worry, Sue, don't get scared. This is not for where you are on the journey. You're not required to do all of that. You're not required, you know, because it was like, let's turn back now if you are, you know. But there does come a place on the path that all of that is right there, Sue. And it was talking about some places, mountains of the Himalayas, you go up so high, and because of, I don't know, the height and the composition of the air, they call it the death zone, because you can't draw enough oxygen to live. And in spiritual practice, you come to those heights, and you also encounter the death zone. But that's like a dying of the self. If you try to ascend too quickly, you'll choke out. You'll choke out. So we always have to be cognizant of the gradual path and taking our journey in a gradual way. Sometimes you can hear things and they are for later. It's just planting a seed, but you have to know, for me, not yet. And then one has more ease in the process. So one of the greatest obstacles is patience and impatience, I should say. A lack of patience. It's one of the greatest obstacles on the path. Especially when you're like all in intellectually, all in mentally, you know. But how do I get all in physically? You can't do it in one fell swoop. Instant enlightenment, sudden enlightenment, it might come suddenly, but it's not sudden. And so it takes a gradual training, a gradual path. And before you can go to the next step, you have to come to the place that you love the previous step. Because if you don't, you'll be 3 steps up and hated it. I don't even believe this. There was a sister that ordained, and about a year later, she came. Now, when the nuns send somebody to me, you know that's the last step. Uh, I mean, that's beyond desperation. That's like no hope when they send them to me. Yeah. So they said, well, she's thinking about leaving, disrobing, and we were thinking maybe she should come stay with you, as if to say, well, that's like just one step before disrobing. I might have to cut that part out. Uh, Says if she goes Panyawadi, you know, like that's like being a layperson, should be all right there, and then she can still keep the robe. Uh, and she came to me one day, and we would talk about a lot of things. She said, I've gotten to the place that I no longer believe this. I don't believe this. I don't believe this. I don't believe this. She said, can you help me? I said, well, the difficulty in helping you with this that you don't believe now means we'd have to go back to what precipitated that, and go back and go back. We have to go all the way back to the beginning, because it's somewhere along those initial stages that you didn't have the self-conviction about these things, you know. And ultimately she did disrobe. She says, I don't even think that I believe in Buddhism at all. You know, I said, well, you know, you're getting older, you better hurry up and investigate something else. I mean, that's where we are with it. If one doesn't arouse a certain kind of confidence based on incremental advances, then they'll get to a place and they will absolutely hit a wall. And then they'll just start rejecting all of it. And that's the difficulty when you have people at a lot of different levels. We could say we're all in one area, perhaps, of one level, but can you imagine when you have someone who's like a beginner and someone who's I'll say not just a tuku, but I'll say a realized tuku. That means it wasn't just that mind stream in the past, but that stream is now fully loaded in the present. You know, so it's speaking of all these different levels, and you have to be careful about what you say that doesn't scare off someone who hasn't come to a certain understanding of something, and not discourage the one who is at another part of the path, who needs a particular instruction to be able to go to the next step. And their journey is getting a little bit arduous now because they're making the deeper commitment, going higher up the mountain, approaching the death zone. After I read that little piece that you sent me, I was thinking about it. I don't like just read these things and put them away. I was thinking about what it means and what it means, you know, like for you. But then I started thinking about what it means for me. And suddenly there was such rejoicing, because what we call death, to me, is not death anymore. And it was a realization that I had today, that I don't think about death, honestly, I don't think about death as the end, a big, profound end of something. Because I'm awakening to a consciousness that didn't have a beginning and has no ending. Never born, never died. And he's coming up stealth, you know, not da-da in my face, but he's like, I was going to say, it's like softly stepping up as a constant companion, walking with me in a kind of way that I start to realize he was always with me. Now I'm speaking about a kind of consciousness that's walking alongside my ordinary mind, influencing me in a certain way with its luminosity, that as I'm walking this path in samsara that has a kind of darkness with it that I call suffering, the luminosity of that companion is brightening the path. And so there is no end to its brightness. So now you're getting into a space where it's hard to talk about words. But what I'm saying is that it can be experienced, but it can only be experienced by the mind that is freeing of limitations. So if I look at ordinary life, I see all of the concreteness, all of the limitations. Everything has weight. Everything has weight. Everything is pressing in. That's called dukkha dukkha. So there's different kinds of dukkha, but that's called dukkha dukkha. It is the things that I like, they press on me. The things that I don't like, they press on me. The things that I want, press on me. The things I don't want, press on me. The people I like, their weight. The ones that I don't like, they are weight. The things that I have that I don't want to give up, they constitute a weight in my life. The ones that I love, because something could happen to them, something I want to do for them, something I want to give them, something I want to see them become, something I want to, everything produces a weight. And I liken that weight to a kind of a darkness. But this other kind of mind, it starts with the Bodhi mind, it ends with the Buddha mind. So Bodhi mind, we call it the awakened mind, but it's the mind that recognizes the dukkha dukkha that we all suffer. So it gets far from me and you, just a notion of me and you. This kind of compassion that develops is not because I'm sorry you can't buy the kind of clothes I buy. It's not the kind of, oh, I feel so sorry for them. I want to give them that. I want to do this. It's not that kind. It's ones who feel pressing in on them the general weight of a self. That's a whole nother awareness. But that you don't start with that awareness. That's where little disciplines come in that begin to shift your mind until your mind teeters off the edge. And then you find yourself feeling the dukkha dukkha, your dukkha dukkha, and everybody else's, and knowing there's nothing that can relieve that. Nothing more can relieve it. Nothing you can do except in some way find the way of escape for yourself and let that luminosity fall on others and begin to light their way. It's really bodhisattva. Yeah. The only thing that you have to offer at that stage. So the rest of the things you can enjoy or not enjoy because it doesn't really matter that much in the whole scheme of things. It matters right here, but in the whole scheme of things, it doesn't really matter that much. Doesn't mean much. Actually, it doesn't mean anything at all. And that's why it presents in stages. And sometimes we want to be at a certain stage, but we haven't done I won't say haven't done the work. We haven't perfected the quality of understanding that allows us to be in that state. The thing about that state is it's a place that if you keep going, you go beyond right and wrong. Now, if someone is on step one or stage one, there's definitely right and wrong. By the time you get to stage 5, there's so many shades, you know. So in one situation, it could be right, in another one, it can be wrong. And in one situation, it could be right for one person and wrong for another. It could be wrong timing. It could be wrong. It's so many shades, but that's not at the beginning because you have to get the idea first. And after you kind of get the idea and you allow it to like roll around in and renew your mind, show you your own mind, show you at which end of that spectrum your view is or your action is, you know, or your thoughts are, then you start doing corrections. That's where the real work is done. It's right there. That's where we are in the process. These are not universal laws forever settled in heaven in that way. I have to understand it, understand its meaning, understand the application, work at garnering or developing the capacity to walk in it to the extent that I understand it. When my understanding grows, then I shift the way I walk in it to increase. And then one gets out of the habit of comparing out of this is what uproots jealousy. It's what uproots like thinking someone is better or worse than another. Someone's getting something that somebody's not getting. Somebody's getting some privilege somebody else is not getting. Somebody's being seen and somebody's not being seen. It's like because our mind continually rolls outward. And so we take the light of the Dharma and it escapes. So when we get to this level, when it's called secret teachings, it doesn't mean that it's so secret the way we define the word secret in the West. But it's like concealing, holding in the light, that it fully shines on us in a way that we can know ourselves completely. And in the beginning, we know ourselves through the lens of our memory and what we've seen and what we've heard. But as we conceal, as we hold this light, take it, secret it. As we secret it, it begins to shine on us, the inner light. And one starts to see oneself, truly see oneself. And it's only then can one begin to make the kinds of shifts that they want to make. And it starts to happen so subtle, so suddenly, But it's not because you're trying to think your way into a posture, but because you've seen yourself. So if I went through this room and I asked you, what is your greatest obstacle or the thing that hinders you the most, everybody in this room would probably have a different thing that they would say. And nobody needs to know what it is, because in our unperfected states, we'll be poking. That's how we do. But I know mine. I've danced around it the past, I'd say, 2 years. Because when it came up for me, and I'm showing how to examine yourself, when it came up for me, I was like, oh no, I'm not like that. Oh, to think that whoever's bringing that thought to me, you don't know me or you don't understand me. It was hard. I mean, like, that's such a harmless thing. I mean, it's no big deal. But it constantly comes around again and again and again. So a year ago, I said, okay, I'm going to start working on this. I mean, really working on it. And every once in a while, I reflect back on how I've done. And I can see I've made a lot of progress. So I'm happy about that. But I can also see where I didn't have the willingness to make as much progress as I could have made. I just didn't have the willingness. And so I'd ask them, well, what's that about? It can't be fear, because I'm not afraid of anybody. So what could it be that would make me in that situation respond in that way if it's not fear? And I kept saying that. That's why I know that's not really me, really true, because I'm not afraid of people. So I had to keep thinking about what it is and why it is that a particular thing comes up in my head. And I still haven't figured it out. I'm 73. My time for figuring it out is running out. So I've gone to the next step now, which is just abandon it. If you can't figure it out, abandon it. Just make it up in your mind that you will stop doing that. Now, the Buddha Master talked about how to do this with that. What was it called, Busita? When you make that, it's a particular method. I can see I need that one. I mentioned it 2 weeks ago, and I read about it. It's the one that says, and then if you break that vow you made to yourself, you're not even a human being. Yeah, that's what it is. The Dharma to break through barriers. I decided I'm gonna take up the Dharma that breaks through barriers. And why? Because I've tried all my other ways. You know, he talks about basically 5 basic ways to uproot something, and I've tried all of them, and I haven't uprooted it. So he says at some point, then you have to like just crush mind with mind. You take up that Dharma. Now it's scary for me to take up this particular Dharma because I've tried so many times before all my life. But I'm getting to the crevices and the corners now. How about you? And when you start looking behind the door, to see if there's dust in the corner. Kay does that. If I'm sweeping, I just go like this. All looks good. She'll look behind the door and she won't say anything. But later on, I just see her with her little thingy and she's cleaning behind the door. So this is like that. So I'm cleaning behind the door. And it says that you start with your worst thing, not the easiest. Usually we start with our easiest things. But he's saying, no. You start with your greatest offense. You know why? Because when you knock that cow over, that sacred cow, everything else it's like dominoes. And I've never really felt confident that I can make that vow and keep it. So I'm making that one. Yeah. Now, I'm not just making it the one vow. It's going to take me a little bit of time to make this vow. I have to keep reminding myself I am making it because it really does take courage because I know what an obstacle it's been for me for most of my adult life. And I'm coming to see that it's rooted in certain behaviors that I have used for protection. And I'm realizing that I can take off that armor, that heavy armor. I no longer need those protections. So struggling to get out of my iron suit. And I'm taking that vow. But it's step by step like that we enter into this. And if we go into it too fast, we'll get disillusioned because we won't be able to make it. If we go into it too slow, we won't make it because we'll never arouse enough energy to do, to make any progress. And so you have to find the right speed for you. I used to like fast cars. But I don't like fast cars anymore. I used to drive 90 and 100 and 110. But I think I'm about 65 now. I drive about 65. Last year it was 75. Year before that it was 80. But you notice that you start getting towards that certain range. It's like, ooh, I could go faster, but can I handle going faster? And it hurt my feelings when I had to back down to 70 on the highway. And now I'm riding in the right lane, driving in the right lane. But in accepting my speed, there I find safety. And so it's important for us to find our speed. And everything else can be tucked away for a future time. Don't worry, because you hide it in your heart. And when you're ready for it, it just pops up. This, what's it called again? She has such a good mind. The Dharma pass through barriers. It's constantly popping up for me. That's why I know now is the time. And I'm thinking I might not be quite ready, So can we get like 3 trial runs, because this is, and if you break it one time, you're less than a human being. And it doesn't mean I'm less than a human being. It's pointing out the importance of really giving your all to this, because you're at the precipice. It's a stop. If you want to go further, this is a cutoff point for that. Don't cut that off. I don't care how much of the other good things you do, you can't go further. And this path is like that. I mean, you can go further intellectually, but the essence won't come with you. And the essence is the realization. It's the fruit of the practice. So he talks about compassion and why compassion is so important. Just the rule applying compassion, the discipline of not sweating the small stuff, the effort that one puts forward to not have to defend, the effort one puts forward to restrain themselves, something they could say, something they would say, but if it wasn't asked for, not offering it. It's an important step, because that's where how we begin to advance in our meditation. Otherwise, meditation becomes our playground. It becomes a place where we fantasize, where we, as we start moving into that spaciousness, we fill it with our toys. We fill it, with the imaginations of our mind. Some of those can be good, some of those can be dangerous slides. So there is a preparation. And it starts by being able to be in a space and yet have established the mandala of your heart. And it allows you to look upon others and think about others with a kindly mind. A kindly mind for those you love is a mind that may have to bring in some disciplines or some restraints, because in our humanness, we're overly invested. So we don't have quite the right balance. We're overly invested. So that kind of requires some restraint. It's like, I just let them do anything they want to do because I love them. That might require some restraint. With clear seeing where boundaries hurt, not having boundaries hurt them or destroy things or keep them dissatisfied. It's like having like a spoiled child. You see how unhappy they are. Nothing pleases them. That, and it's, oh, I wish my child was happier. Yeah. But because there has not been just the necessary amount that puts them into the contentment zone, then they get into a little bit of trouble. Sometimes it's not the restraint. Sometimes it's offering more leeway. Give more leeway. Sometimes it's not about restraint or leeway. It's about mind your own business. Don't have to get into everything, every conversation. Sometimes it's not about any of those three. It's about observing everything, because there you see the interplay of cause and condition, or causality. And that's how you grow and how you develop insight, by just seeing the interplay, seeing cause and condition, cause and condition. That's how you come to understand cause and condition, by observation. Of course, you can understand cause and condition by action too, but sometimes observation is easier. It's a less painful path. Of course, if you don't get it by observation, then you have to experience it through your actions. Mm-hmm. But this is how that what appears to be a luminous friend walking beside you is how you come to realize it's not two, but one. In the beginning, it appears as if it's two. But as you keep walking the path, you start to see it's not two, it's one. So one's original nature doesn't mean originally I was this, like, and then, I don't know, stuff obscured my vision and now I'm this, because you couldn't have any confidence in that. How do I know that if I'm working, become a Buddha again, that the same thing won't happen? It's not that I ever was a Buddha. So that changes my idea or understanding of what a Buddha is. And if I had any mind or idea that it was a something, a personality, then I can see I've missed the whole thing. I'm looking in some concrete ways that that's not it. So instead of thinking that we become more of something by tacking on all of these good things and all of this, it's not that we become more, we become less. Until this sense of self is rubbed out. But when it's rubbed out, it doesn't mean it's completely erased. It means that one is not attached to things, outer things or inner things. So understanding that word attachment is key to advancing on this path. Understanding what it means to you, layer by layer by layer, like peeling back onion skin. In the beginning, it has a very, very concrete, frame of reference. I like that. I don't want it to go away. I don't like that. I don't want to see it. We have some very, very concrete ideas about attachment and what attachment is. But as you continue to walk this path, there will be a shift in how you define, how you see, how you understand attachment. And it becomes a difference in you having things, possessing things, or those things having you or possessing you. And it's not just things, physical things, but also mental things. I'm not doing a good job today. Trying to set the stage. You know how you can look and then, like when it's clouds, I might be using the wrong word, fog, which I think are kind of like low-hanging clouds, are they? I don't know. But you can see a fog in a distance, and the fog is up there. But you're on this road, and after a while, you are right in the fog. And when you look right here, it doesn't look like fog, but by the time you look over there, you can see fog. But right here, it's not foggy. And what I want to say is, although as we're ascending, we don't have to look far before things get foggy. But what I say to you is when you step up to it, it's clear. And so whenever things are foggy for you, when you can't make heads or tails, can't understand something, just recognize you have just not stepped close enough to it. That's all. And that should dispel your angst, your irritation. All you have to say to yourself, I have not stepped close enough to it yet. And it gives you some impetus to keep walking, to just keep walking. And to ponder something and think about it. But then after you pondered and thought about it, then he says, forget about it. Just forget about it. You ponder, you thought you came up with some conclusion, forget about what you pondered and thought about. Also, forget about your conclusion. Because sometimes we hold on to the conclusion that we had on step 2. When we get to step 10, we're, stymied because the conclusion was a little bit off on step 2. So it's fine. We come to a conclusion about what things are, what they mean, how important they are, what I'm willing to do. But on step 2. Then when I go to step 3, I have to go through that whole rigmarole again, that whole examination again. When I go to step 4, it's the whole thing again. So this inculcating the mind that Buddha Master does, that is the way of life. We're constantly going around and around and around, examining, but from a little different vantage point, and a little different vantage point, with a little bit more experience under our belt, a little more testing of the conclusion we came to last time, a little wider berth of looky-see, a little bit more willingness to give the benefit of the doubt, a little bit more. It's so, it brings you into such a benign place, such an easy space. And yes, the others around you benefit from it, but you benefit the most. because it takes away the dukkha that comes with our continually conceptualizing and judging. That is the only way to open up. We have to let those things go. We can't open up and hold that way of thinking. And it's scary because that's who we know. That's ourselves. That's just the way I am. So it requires a whole different way, coming into a whole different way of knowing. I won't say knowing ourselves, because the more we come into this way of knowing, the less self is seen. So we've been talking about entering into meditation. And I am right now talking about that. And last week, talking about that. The way that we enter into these states, and that we can't read our way in, intellectualize our way in. We can't practice our way in. But it's a gateless gate for a transparent, I'll say a transparent being for now, because that gives us something to hang our hat on, not a nothingness, transparent being. Right now, when I look at myself, I'm very, what's the opposite of transparent? More than opaque. I'm very, very solid. You know, dense, good word. And density that has weight. Can you feel it? I mean, I can feel this shirt on my skin, but if I roll my arm up, I still feel weight. I actually feel the weight of my own bones or something. I feel weight in this body. I feel the pressing in of space even on my face. I feel the pressure of whatever that pressure is in my eyeballs. I feel the cares of my life. Even the ones that I said I've given up, they're lurking there somewhere. And if I withdraw enough, there they are. You can't just pretend you gave them up. One has to first renounce. That's what renunciation is. Having an intention to be free. Knowing that, I tell you how it changes things. My daughter's been calling me recently. Now my son has started calling me. And it's really good, but you know, when I used to talk to them, I mean, their world is different than mine. Their life is different than mine. Mostly all I can say is, do you need anything? You know, because they're going to live the life they want to live. And I'm not trying to be their mother when they're in their 50s. And so, and plus they didn't ask me anything. Now, if they ask me, I tell them. If they don't ask me for advice, I don't give it. That's why we stay good friends. Um, so that when they really need something, they need to ask me about something, they know they can. I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to tell them what I want them to do. I'll just tell them, what the Buddha says basically, and they can decide what to do. So I've been getting all these little email thingies. We call them texts, you know, and uh, and they're very, you know, they're just saying what they want to say, very short. Um, but it's not like the other texts that I didn't even respond to that they, wrote me and they're telling me about this and telling me about that. It's like, now they're asking little questions, deep questions though. And they don't always say, well, what would Buddha say about this? But they would say, I was thinking the other day, looking at my life and such and such. Still didn't ask a question, but they were saying, I'm looking, I'm searching. I'm not doing anything concerning me. I'm just doing my own cultivation. So that whatever luminosity grows here when I'm doing my preliminary practices, I am in it. I'm not just saying words. I am those words. So today we're going to do the 4 immeasurables. And we're gonna enter contemplation from that space. First, there's the language prajna, right? Then there's the what? Contemplative illumination. And from that comes the wisdom. So what's the first one? What's the first of the 4? Immeasurable. But give it to me in a long way, because okay, just stop right there. May all living beings have peace and happiness and maintain the causes of peace and happiness. That's the third one. May all living beings have peace and happiness and the causes of peace and happiness. Now, if I'm speaking of them having peace and happiness, the only peace I can imagine them having is the peace that I possess. The only happiness I can imagine is the happiness that I possess. That's the first reflection. We all have some peace and some not peace. We all have some happiness and some not happiness. So at this time, the mind to enter into the words, to take it from just being language, is I need to think now about the happinesses that I have. We should say in the church, count your blessings, name them one by one, and see what God has done. You know, but it's a little bit more than counting your blessings. It is really breathing in the peace and breathing in, experiencing the full value of peace and happiness. So you might start with things that, you know, you're grateful for, things that make you happy, things like that. But then it goes deeper than that. And you really actually experience the peace. And this kind of happiness is a kind of settled happiness. You know, status by itself alone does not make us happy. Fame does not. Money does not. So you start going a little deeper. What actually brings me this kind of contentment? And when you find it and it opens up in you, that's when you are walking in the all beings have happiness and the peace and peace and the causes of peace. It's not regardless, just let them have it. Just let them be happy. It's not that. Because we're ushering forth the aspiration for producing the causes that will allow that to be present in their life. So now we've left the peace and happiness, haven't we, to the causes, producing the causes that will allow them to have it. Causes becomes more important than peace and happiness because the causes produce peace and happiness or not. So now your aspiration's gone a little bit deeper to the causes. What's the second? Which flows us into the second.
May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering.
Ah. May all living beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And in this place where one's heart is focused, and full, we understand that sometimes to be free from suffering is not that easy a road. Some things that we get into is not so easy to get out of. Some things that we have to get out of for a while hurt more than staying in. Takes a lot of courage to break oneself free from suffering. The things that I suffer with, I know how hard it is to make changes. Don't even want to deal with it. Just don't want to deal with it. So compassion arises for changes that we have to make to get free. And that changes how we look at people's struggles. And it changes how we can hold our own. So this compassion for oneself, because you're part of all living beings. And yet you're not separating yourself from anyone else. What's the third one? May they produce the causes of happiness and peace and not produce the causes of suffering. And may my heart be glad about it. Now we're cutting off judgment, instigation, the tendency to impute our own ideas about what they should do and how they should go about it. It even cuts back on the need to even think about it that much. It frees up energy so one can just be on standby available. And it seems like as we get these kinds of notions in the head, it feels like the head just expands. You know, the consciousness expands. Suddenly what was so tight and pressing in, it feels like there's space. We get a kind of, you know, it's not that it's an altered state. It's that this is getting more towards the real state. And the one that we walk around in all the time is what's altered. So this is the release from the altered state that's based on our collacious. And in this space, there's a sense of a hopefulness that things work themselves out. Whatever it is, good or bad, it expires and it's done. There's comes a sense of things being final and not never ending. You know, they can fall away. They can fall away. They reach their expiration date. And it's allowing them to fall away, allowing things to come to a head. Having a baby is not a pretty sight. And delivering it as the mother is not that good of an experience. Yeah. But in that final moment, when the baby's head comes out, I mean, you can't even remember 5 minutes earlier how unbearable that pain was. Now, I could say that as a mother, but if you haven't had one or you'll never have one, you can't say it. But I could tell you, it's the notion is preposterous that I won't be in excruciating pain for the next 10 years or die. I mean, really, at that last minute when you tell him he's saying push, and I'm like, you say push one more time, I'm gonna get up off this table, and then you have, but you gotta, because you're in it now. You got to, and because you have no other choice, you push, and then it's done, and you hear that baby cry. Oh, like that. So you start to have this expansion of mind that for every temptation, there is a way of escape. There's a way, every suffering, there's a way to get out of it. On some level, doesn't mean that everything on this lowest physical, densest realm is going to come out looking the way you want it to look. But that's the external world. It's talking about this internal world that has several categories of natural law that impact in different ways. And in some ways that you'll just be lifted above it all. So all that stuff can be going on around you doesn't bother you at all. Maybe in another space, all other conditions being right. When your mind shifts, it changes the outer condition. What I will say is that you can go through a lot. Things you thought you couldn't handle, things you thought you could never untie, knots you thought you could never untie, things you thought you could never unravel, things you thought you could never understand, and things you definitely thought you would never accept become manageable, acceptable. Don't sweat the small stuff. Because such a contentment and a stillness develops in you. That's how we think about it. Everything has to be taken into a certain way, personal in our life, the way we see it and understand it and know it. And then when you're finished with even just doing those, oh, did we do the fourth one? No, what's the fourth one?
May all beings have endless generosity and stay far away from greed and anger.
Yeah, endless generosity, boundless generosity. That spaciousness that we can experience starting with hearing about it, thinking about it. One begins to feel a bit of it without clinging to it, and it becomes boundless. And that leads us to the space of meditation. And if you needed to, you could close your eyes. You could actually keep them open, whatever works best for you. And then you can take your attention to peace. We used the breath last time, right? We can just turn our attention to the peacefulness that we feel right now. Throughout our whole body, peace. Peace, it's a mental feeling, but it also registers in the body. So you may find that your shoulders are suddenly feel like they kind of like raised, but when that's incongruent with this sense of mental peace. So you just relax them and they just drop. And the shoulders may have dropped, but now you feel the tension in the hands. And you can just relax that. It's all pervading peace. In front of me, behind me, to the left and the right, the four cardinal directions above and below, immersed. And just staying with that simple sense of no matter what might be happening, there is a refuge. It could be for a minute, for an hour, for a day, for a decade, for a lifetime. And then you may feel some strain in the back because we're sitting against the chair. But if we sat up straight, the vertebrae stack one upon another, and that weight is gone. You get a sort of sense of a weightlessness of the body. Applied thought and sustained thought. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, peace and the causes of peace. You can expand on it. May they never be separated from the causes of happiness and peace. May they be free of the causes of suffering. Why? Because you're not holding it in your mind. So you have to sustain it. Bringing all of that back. It could just be one word, peace. The peace is a mental feeling. So you have to hold the feeling, not the word, the feeling. For you, it might be all living beings. The operative word might be all, because you know you have discriminatory aspirations. And you're getting a sense of wanting to expand your ground, all living beings. It might just be in your mind of humanity, all of humanity. If I'm one that has aversion to animals and insects, I might say all living beings, because I'm deliberately including what I have aversion to. Now you're breathing normally and you're not paying attention to the in-breath or the out-breath or where you detect it at the tip of the nose or any of that. You're concentrating on penetrating the experience of peace, all living beings abiding in peace. And your heart being glad about that. Three minutes, that's all you have to do. If you do that a few times a day, don't do it long so you can, I don't have time, but just throughout the day, just taking a few minutes. After a while, your mind will incline naturally in that direction. You don't have to re-educate your brain. Your mind will naturally incline that way. And where you used to be short, or like, you know, sometimes some people can have, and we're closing. Some people could have a really bad, you know, they're just in a funk. They don't even say nothing to you. They can even speak nicely to you, but they're in such a funk that they're like just perfuming the whole area. It's so heavy you can cut it with a knife, and they don't mean it, you know, but it is bringing injury. That's why we have to take care of these things, these inner attitudes we have, because they affect other people. We're harming people all the time. Never said a word to them, but we're harming them all the time with what's going on. And we're creating these conditions inside. Don't want to hurt people that way. But you notice that when you couldn't get out of that, you couldn't stop that blue day or whatever, you'll find that you have less and less blue days. You know, and that's the benefit of the practice. And when you start seeing these manifest in your life in that way, these little things become much. So I want to stop right there for today. We're talking about assuming the mind of beings in the higher realms. And this is how we take that out. Somebody offer. We offer the great peace that we feel that we experience today. To all living beings.
We offer the peace and stillness that we gather today as a Sangha to all living beings who suffer and look for ways to release our own suffering so we can be truly there and serve others.
Thank you.